Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
The trade war has been canceled, or at least postponed, until next month. After signing an executive order levying tariffs against Canada, Donald Trump had a change of heart. With 8 hours to go before the midnight deadline, Donald Trump announced he will hold off on his trade war, at least for 30 days. The news came from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau after he spoke with the president by phone on Monday afternoon. Canada announced it will spend another $200 million to combat drug trafficking and create a new fentanyl czar. That's in addition to the $1.3 billion border security package that the government had already announced last month in response to Trump's tariff threat. So Trump now says, and I quote from his post on Truth Social, "I am very pleased with this initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured." The president seems to be leaving the door open to a deal that would avoid tariffs altogether, even after he signed an executive order to implement them. So did he just change his mind? Or is it a power play? I'm David Smith. Today on The Big Story, Trump's sudden flip-flop on tariffs. I'm joined by Kate Harrison, conservative strategist and vice chair at Summa Strategies in Ottawa. Hi, Kate.
Hey, Dave. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you for making some time on a crazy day.
Indeed.
So let's kind of take this piece by piece and figure out what's happening here. Monday was a wild ride in Trump tariff news. He signed an executive order imposing tariffs as of 12:01 a.m. Tuesday. Then at around 3 p.m. on Monday afternoon, he spoke with Prime Minister Trudeau on the phone. Just after 4 p.m., Trudeau announced that the tariffs would be delayed by at least 30 days. Why do you think Trump came around at the last second there? What do you make of the move to delay these tariffs that he had already announced?
There's likely, as there always is, a couple of different things at play here. I think the march of a teaser, the U.S. markets, and I think that might have given some in the White House some pause to really consider whether or not this was the right path. I think you could also, if you're really looking into the language that Trump used to justify the tariffs or perhaps the climb down, there was a sense that maybe this needed to be about the border more than anything else in order to allow for the legality of the tariffs to be imposed. There was quite a few people noting that the tariffs themselves, as initially proposed, might not be legal. Now, if they were tied to the border and national security, that may have been different. And you really saw, David, within the last 24 hours, a lot of the conversation turned towards the border, which brings me to my third and final point. I think that you saw the Trudeau government make some serious commitments in terms of what they would do to address border security. It followed a conversation that had happened between President Trump and the Mexican president earlier today, also looking at strengthening border commitments. And now Canada is coming to the table, not just with that $1.3 billion plan that they had announced, but significant more resources in terms of tackling organized crime and money laundering. They are now committing to some kind of a fentanyl czar, though the details are a bit scant. But more money, more focus on the border than had initially been provided. I think that provided cover for Trump to give this a pause.
Okay, because we have been speaking through this whole sordid affair about Trump's need to get a win, so to speak. His need to be able to point to something Action Canada took where he can say, I made them do that because of my threat of tariffs, and them doing that will be good for America. That's a win for me, Donald Trump. My Trump tariff plan is good. That's the basic political calculus on his side. So do you think it is as simple as squeezing that last little bit of extra action out of the government when we look at the whole balance of the events as they unfolded on Monday?
I'm not as convinced of that. Had we made these commitments a few days ago, David, I am not sure that we would still be having the conversation about tariffs today. Like, I do think that Trump can definitely position this as squeezing Canada at the 11th hour. But what is suitable today may not be suitable tomorrow. And I think part of the challenge that the government has been trying to navigate on this is, what is this all really about? Well, I would contend that it's kind of always been about the border, the $1.3 billion plan that was committed to in December, but for which there's no real legislative teeth because of prorogation, could have gotten us off on the better foot than what we had with Trump. And instead, we, as Canada and the current government, decided to really ratchet up the pressure with our retaliatory measures and, a press conference on a Saturday evening talking about how serious this is. Had we been having that more serious conversation about the border specifically, had we had the opportunity to engage with Donald Trump and the administration directly and those around him directly, which it sounds like the Prime Minister hasn't, I'm not sure that we would have had today play out as we did. It's possible that we actually could have avoided much of this pain and a lot of the anxiety that's been hanging over Canadians' heads for the last 48 hours.
There's another school of thought, I think, emerging. What if in 30 days from now, this all happens again? We come right down to the deadline for this tariff pause, and Canada comes out with another suite of policy measures, and we get another 30-day pause. Do you think that there might be a pattern that could be emerging here?
I think if there is a pattern, then it demonstrates how ill-prepared we are to weather that storm, David. So we can't be in this continued yo-yo at the whim of the United States based on how Donald Trump is thinking and feeling on any given day. We were right to take action on the border. We should have done it sooner. But I do think that we also need to be looking at what can be done, for instance, on internal trade barriers. What can be done in terms of our own tax regime? What are we doing to help diversify our trade and export partners? These are not easy topics. They're not something for which there are quick solutions, but we shouldn't waste this 30 days of reprieve and sit on our hands and wait for Donald Trump's next dictate.
On the debate around what some people see as appeasement, are you of the mind that it's necessarily a bad thing for Canada to be doing what Donald Trump is asking us to do?
I think that fixing the border and trying to address the fentanyl crisis is something that is in Canada's domestic interest, not just something of interest to the United States. And I would observe that there was broad political consensus to do that. Just before Christmas, all parties had agreed that we needed a border plan to help address some of these issues. It should have happened again before December, David, but that across the political spectrum, there was consensus to do that. For whatever reason, it either wasn't good enough, it wasn't communicated properly, or it sounds like Donald Trump wasn't speaking to us at all about what that plan was. And that, to me, speaks to a bigger problem that we have with the current Trudeau government and the level of their relationships or the lack thereof that exists in terms of making sure this plan is clearly communicated. Because again, I think we could have avoided a lot of the heartache of the last 72 hours had we tabled these proposals earlier, and had we tabled this to the right people earlier, we probably could have avoided this anxiety. So I do not think that this is about appeasement. Obviously, Canadians don't want to just do whatever is requested of us. That's why retaliatory measures were supported, again, across the political spectrum, because these are unjustified tariffs. But I do think that this is a good moment for Canadians to have a hard look at what we are doing to hold up our end of this relationship. And you could talk about that in relation to the border. You could talk about that in relation to our defense spending commitments. And you could talk about that in relation to how the current government has treated Donald Trump like a bit of a political punching bag. They have made him out to be the enemy. They have made him out to be the boogeyman. And I think he has noticed. And I think that has weakened our relationships and our ability to have a productive working relationship with the president.
I'd like to ask you about some of the language in Donald Trump's statement. He posted a pretty lengthy post on Truth Social just after the news broke. The very last few lines are interesting. He says, quote, This is Trump on Truth Social. I'm very pleased with this initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured, end quote. Is he leaving the door open there to a deal that would eliminate the need for tariffs altogether?
But perhaps I think part of the challenge is that we're dealing with a lot of moving goalposts. The border was a consistent piece in terms of Trump's request of us. I would have to think that at least part of that economic equation could involve additional energy exports, or maybe looking at trying to get some more pipeline infrastructure built. The reality is that we've got a really critical relationship to preserve here with the United States in terms of our economy. We need to be doing a bit more to stand on our own 2 feet, as I mentioned, diversify who our trading partners are. But it is possible that, if the border more around the trade considerations around USMC in terms of what he needs to exactly expose.
Okay, very interesting. Kate Harrison, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you weighing in on this for us.
Thanks so much. Take care now.
And again, that is Kate Harrison, Vice Chair with Summa Strategies in Ottawa, conservative political strategist, reacting to the news that Donald Trump will, for now, hold off on levying those tariffs against Canada. We all believed that they were coming. And like Lucy with a football, Donald Trump pulled them away at the last second. Still, we should note that this story is far from over. It's a 30-day pause, not a complete backtrack from President Trump. And on Monday afternoon, Trump was still saying things like this about Canada's trade relationship with the United States.
But look, what I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. We give them protection, military protection. We don't need them to build our cars. I'd rather see Detroit or South Carolina or any one of our Tennessee, any one of our states build the cars. They could do it very easily. We don't need them for the cars. We don't need them for lumber. We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy. So I say, why are we doing this? Why are we willing to lose between $100 billion and $200 billion a year? We don't need them. As a state, it's different. As a state.
So again, the only person who knows for sure whether or not Donald Trump will levy tariffs against Canada is Donald Trump himself. The rest of us will have to wait and see what happens in 30 days. And that was The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode. Email us hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on any of your other favorite podcast players. Please remember to rate, review, follow, and share. Until next time, I'm David Smith. Thank you for listening.